Hey guys, we are back with more Genesis. So we are now picking up where we left off in Genesis chapter 11. We're going to cover the rest of this chapter, which is verses 10 through 32. And then we're going to jump into Genesis chapter 12. So we are still in Genesis, first book of the Bible, 11th chapter, and the first part of the 12th chapter. We're going to stop around verse 8. So this chapter is going to require us to go back a bit in time, recap a few things, and then start to go forward. I am going to skip over a lot because what I'm trying to do is introduce us to Abram. Abram is the father of many nations, or the exalted father as he is now, which is Abram, who is later renamed by God into Abraham. And what we get from this is all of the Israelites, the nations that come from him. And this is all based off of a conversation with he and God and him following the instructions that God gave. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to start with taking from where we were when the ark landed to how we get to Abram, just so that as we're discussing this, we can understand it. And as we move forward in the Bible, we'll be able to reference this and understand where this line comes from. So if we go back to where we talked about the ark. So the flood happened. Noah built the ark. God tells him to take animals, two of every kind, some of other kinds, and bring them into this ark with his 3 sons and their wives. And so Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives, so these 8 people are on here, and this one family is saved from the flood. Everything else is destroyed. All the other people, all the other animals, everything on earth is destroyed. And after a period of at least 1 year, they are able to leave this ark, and they begin to repopulate the earth, and they begin to grow and develop cultures and move across lands and things like that. So we are going to follow one of these sons, Shem, one of Noah's sons. We're going to follow him as his family begins to grow generation by generation. And we get to the 9th generation following Shem, and we get to meet Abram. And Abram is who we're going to kind of take off from here. We're going to follow his family, his children, his life, their families, their children, their lives, until we become this nation of people. And so we're going to go ahead and kick this off. So we're going to be in Genesis chapter 11. We're going to start at verse 10. Still the first book of the Bible, so we are right up front, just a couple pages in. And it starts off with, these are the descendants of Shem. Told you, not making this up. We are following the descendants of Shem. Shem is one of Noah's 3 sons. And so what it tells us is there are generation after generation where there are children born. And if you notice in certain verses that I'm going to point out, it says that they had other sons and daughters. These generations are plentiful when it comes to children. There are sons and daughters, not just one child, but we're kind of tracing the lineage. So we go from my grandma. My grandmother has brothers and sisters, but for me, my grandmother to my mother is an important line. For my mom has brothers and sisters, but from my mom to me is a pretty important line. So for my grandmother to my mother to me is one line, although we each all have different brothers and sisters as well. So we were going to follow just this connecting line. So it starts off in verse 10 that these are the descendants of Shem. And we see in verse 11 that Shem has several children. In verse 3, we see that his son has other sons and daughters, and one particular son who is the great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of Abram. And we'll see that repeated. There is a son, there are sons and daughters, so there's brothers and sisters for that son. And then this particular line goes down to the next one, and we are just creating a nice little line down our family tree. And so we're going to run through all of those. It goes from verse 11 down to verse 22. Now it continues, but I want to stop at verse 22 because this is where we kind of switch on and pay attention to who these people are, because this is where our natural thought processes would kind of, or natural family tree is kind of where we would talk about. We typically don't talk about your 3rd, 4th, 5th great grandparent, but you do talk about your grandparent and your mother. So here is the grandfather of Abram, who is Nahor. Nahor is the father of Terah. Terah is Abram's father. So we see in verse 22 that Nahor is born, and he has brothers and sisters. And then we see in verse 24 that Terah is born, and that in verse 25, Terah has brothers and sisters. And in verse 26, it says that Terah, at 70 years old, has now become the father of 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And then we see, so Terah is Abram's father. He has a brother, Haran, and we have the brother Nahor. So Nahor got his grandfather's name. We do it commonly, so don't be confused by seeing the name again. He just got to carry his grandfather's name. Now, Haran has a son. So Abram has a brother named Haran who has a son. That's his nephew. And his nephew is Lot. We hear a lot about Lot's wife. We're going to talk about Lot a little bit before we get to ever meeting her. We're going to talk about Lot a little bit. But Lot is the nephew of Abram. And it says in verse 28 that Haran dies before his father does. So the family absorbs the responsibility for his son Lot. And what we see is Nahor, the grandfather. We see Terah, who is the father. We have Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran passes away, so his son is absorbed by his brothers. They take him on, they make sure he is raised properly, he has family support and structure, and they are a unit. They do not say, oh, well, your daddy's dead, so, God be with you. They take him on and they bring him in and they make sure he's cared for. And it says that in verse 29 that Abram and Nahor, the 2 remaining brothers, take wives. Abram's wife is Sarai, and Nahor's wife is Milcah. Milcah is the daughter of Haran. So he has taken a wife. We do see that when people have daughters, they name their daughters. They are listed. Where in all those verses that we covered kind of really quickly, it does cover sons and daughters being born. I'm pointing this out for a reason. Very, very soon into the future, I'm going to loop back and be like, remember this? Everybody has sons and daughters, but we do not see that Terah has sons and daughters. We see that Terah has 3 sons. Abram has brothers. We see Abram has brothers. 3 brothers. So, what we're going to do is hold on to that piece of information because we're going to reference that back probably in the next video or 2. So, Abram's wife is Sarai. Sarai in verse 30 is barren. Barren means she can't have children. She's infertile. We don't hear talk about infertility in church a lot. It doesn't really get preached on. We talk about being pregnant with possibility. We hear about a word in your belly. God's going to birth something through you. But we don't really talk about barrenness or the ability to, or the inability to be able to have children. But Sarah, or Sarai, she's still Sarai at this point. Her name gets changed too, is barren. She doesn't have any children. And it is important to point that out because part of the promise that God gives Abram, and we're going to talk about that in just the next couple of verses, is that he's going to be the father of nations. And I don't know how you're the father of nations if you don't have any babies. So something has to give. So in verse 31, Terah, Abram's father, takes his son and his grandson, their daughter-in-laws, their wives, their families, and they leave. They move into the land of Canaan. We hear the land of Canaan all the time. Canaan was another son of Noah. And what happens is we're going to keep seeing names and lands that match. Names and lands match because if I found this new uncharted territory, I'm going to name it what I want to name it. I might name it after my first child. I might name it after myself. I might name it after my dad. But that's typically what we see. Virginia is a name, also a place. Charlotte is a name, also a place. This is This is not something that's unusual. It's just that when they put it together, the names kind of get weird. So you want to make sure you're reading this carefully so you know when you're talking about a person and when you're talking about a land. It is always clear if you take your time. So they go into the land of Canaan and they settle there in the land of Haran, who also has that's the same name as the brother. So Terah stays there for several years and he passes away. At this point in verse 32, it is Abram, his wife Sarai, and his nephew Lot as a family unit living together. All their possessions, everything they have. If they have servants, they are there. If they have people that live in their home, they're there. Wives, children, those things, they're there. So this is what we have in this space. So at the end of 32, they are living in Canaan. It is there is Abram, Lot, and Sarai. At the start of chapter 12, we're just going to keep moving right along. We're going to stop around verse 8. It says that God said to Abram, go from your country, leave your people, leave your land, leave what you have, and I'm going to ask you to go somewhere. And when you get there, I'll tell you where there. He said, go to the land that I'm going to show you. I will show you. This is a future thing. He's saying, pack up and leave and start walking. And when you get to the place I want you to get to, I'm going to tell you that you're there. I'm going to show it to you as you move. God didn't promise him at this point anything. What he said first was, pack up what you got, get your people, leave this land, and I want you to go. I want you to go to a land that I'm going to show you. In the future, I'm going to show you this land that I want you to go to, but just start walking for now. And the promise that he gives him in verse 2 is, I'm going to make of you a great nation. I'm going to make of you this man who's married to a woman who can't have children, who he obviously loves and cares for, and has this one wife, and he is married to this one woman who has no children. And God says, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name so great that your name is going to be a blessing to other people. Just mentioning your name is a blessing, because the promise I'm going to make to you is going to be so great that when people talk about what I do for you, they're going to receive a blessing. They're going to restore their faith. They're going to walk different. They're going to talk different. They're going to believe different because of your name being mentioned. And in verse 3, it says, I'm going to bless those who bless you. And the ones who curse you, I'm going to curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So, not all of your family, but all the families on the earth will be blessed. Everybody is going to get an opportunity to be blessed through you. But because of you, something that's going to come from you is going to bless everybody on earth. Everybody. I'm saying this because I want you to remember this. Put a pen in it. We're going to talk about it later. So, in verse 4, Abram went. He got up and he left. He was 75 years old, and he was like, well, we finna take this walk, y'all. Grab your grip, get everything you got, and let's go. And that's what he does. He gets up and he follows the instructions. It says in verse 5 that he took his wife, his brother's son, and all the possessions they had, and all the persons through whom they have acquired. So they have servants that are with them. I'm saying servants, not slaves, because slavery in the Bible was designed to be different than the way slavery played out across the world. Not just in Americas, not just for Black people, not just for specific countries and cultures. Slavery in the Bible was designed to be an entirely different thing. They are servants. There is a method to this. There is a treatment plan to this. There is a way that this is supposed to work. When it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, you out of line. And I'm not condoning slavery. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that they did it different than the way God told them to, which is probably why it worked out bad for everybody in the long run. So they take everything they have, the people they have, their servants they have, their families. If they had, a real good friend that's like family that wanted to come, you a cousin now, hop on in, let's go. And so they got everything they have and they start to travel through the land of Canaan. Not this area in particular where they settled, but they're traveling throughout the land. And there are Canaanites in the land. Canaanites mean of Canaan. They are just people who have descended from Canaan the same way that Abram descended from Shem. And so in verse 7, it says that the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, to your seed, to your children, I will give this land. And what Abram does is build an altar and worship the Lord. He didn't say, God, I don't have no kids. He didn't say, well, I don't know how that's finna happen, God, because, the wife that I have, I'm not going to get another one because I really like this one. And she can't have children. He didn't say, God, well, you must be getting ready to do, do something over here. It's about to be a miracle happening over here. He didn't get into details. It doesn't say any of that. What it says is that he built an altar and he worshiped the Lord. He built an altar and he worshiped. And after he had worshiped, then he packed up his stuff and he moved on a little bit further. He began to put feet to his faith. God said, I'm going to give this land to your offspring. So first promise is that he was going to give him offspring. I'm going to make you a father to many nations. I'm going to give you offspring. The second one is that they're going to get this land. That's the promise that God has given him. As he's walking, as he's going, God still hasn't shown him where to go. He just said, hey, your family is going to have this land here. Then it says that he moved on, and as he moved on, he pitched his tent just outside of Bethel. And then it says he built an altar and he invoked the name of the Lord. Invoking just means to call on. It means to strongly compel to attention. When you invoke the name of the Lord, that's when you come, that's worship. That's when you are pulling on heaven and like, God yourself, God, I need you to sit right here with me. That type of thing. And so he really spent time, instead of trying to understand the promise, instead of trying to have a million different conversations about the promise, what he did was he praised God for it. He was like, you told me you're going to show me when I get to the land. You just told me that this land is going to belong to my offspring. I don't know where offspring are coming from, but I'm just going to trust that it's going to happen, and I'm going to walk with it. And I'm going to praise you in advance for that. So all of this information is great, beautiful story. But what do we do with this in our everyday life? What does God telling Abram to, collect your family and go on somewhere, and I'm going to show you when you get there? It's about trust. It's about trust, and it's about praising God for calling you into something new. It's about praising God for the promise, even though the promise hasn't been fulfilled. We need to learn how to trust. God is not going to give us the whole plan. We got mortal minds, and our brains, we can't handle it. We can't handle it. Our brains can't comprehend the thoughts of God because he thinks outside of what we have the capability for. I don't expect my children to understand the complexities of filing a tax return. But I got that. I'm good. And the same way, God doesn't expect us to understand the complexities of his plans and the things that he has to do and the things that he has done for us. He just expects us to trust. And this is what we see here. So we're going to learn how to trust. We're going to take this and we're going to understand that God gave us a promise. And sometimes all the promise that God gave us based on where we are is, I got you. Don't even worry about it. You're not by yourself in this. I'm with you. And that's all the trust. That's all we need to trust. That's the promise that we got right now, is that we're not going to be alone. He's not going to fail us. He's not going to forsake us. And we're going to hold on to that trust. And we're going to hold on to that promise. And we're going to put our faith on that. And we put feet to our faith, and we're going to worship. So find something that God has promised you. Even if all he promised you is that you will never be alone because I'm going to be with you. Joshua 1:5 says it. If you need to hold on to something, say that to yourself. Either Joshua 1:5 or Joshua 1:9. I got those kind of locked away in my brain. It helps me to remember that I can trust God no matter what. And then I'm going to worship him because I placed my trust in him and he said he won't let me down. So with that, you guys have a fantastic week. Go be great.